Hey everyone, welcome to today's video. Welcome to the Gamey Daddy channel. So I put out a Cyberpunk 2077 video discussing the bugs, discussing my position on all of what is going on compared to other gaming companies that have received heavy flack, and how much self-touch CD Projekt Red is going to get from all of us. And if you haven't checked that video out, it's probably going to be one of my most controversial videos on this topic, but I designed it to be that way because I wanted to force a conversation that I have noticed in the past. But today's video is going to be a spin-off and a continuation because we're counting down to the release of Cyberpunk 2077. In a few hours, everyone's going to be able to get their hands on this game. And there has been a big patch that's been released. Now, I noticed on my Good Old Games library that a few days ago after buying it, they allowed for Good Old Games customers, which is their own CD Projekt Red game store, to be able to preload the game. We got to preload it before everybody else. And so I went ahead and preloaded it at that point. But when I powered on my PS5, I saw a preload, just a marker saying you can preload the game right now. But then I noticed that on my Good Old Games library, there was an indication asking me to update the game. Now, I personally think that this is the much weighted, much talked about, much anticipated, much yada, yada, yada update that we have been looking for. And my concern, or I guess my question, honestly, it's not a concern. I'll be happy to play the game the way it is. But my question is this update going to fix a lot of what's going on? Now, granted, there are so many things to deal with when you bring out a video game. One of the really cool aspects of this is, for me, Cyberpunk is not only going to be a gaming experience, but it's also going to be a learning experience, because to me, this is a CD, Projekt Red that has brought out and actually polished some of the more landmark games in the past few years. They've shown some dedication, which has actually allowed for them to grow. So I really don't see this as an impediment to their progress as a development firm and their status as one of the more loved development studios, publishers out there, to be very frank. I think that this patch will definitely fix some issues, but not everything so far, because these bugs sometimes can take a while to get to and take a while to deploy and fix because of the way games like these, or video games in general, work. So there are different kinds. I was watching a little bit of SkillUp's review. I stopped myself short because what I like to do first is I kind of watch the intro to his reviews. I stop, I play the game. After experiencing the game, then I go ahead and I go ahead and watch the complete review from him specifically. I do enjoy watching SkillUp's reviews, even though sometimes I get, I disagree and I basically get upset with some of the things he says. But when you look at it, some of the things he says do have merits and some I disagree with. That's just what it is. But I fast forwarded and he talked something about lighting, and I thought this is actually very interesting, because this really does open up the door for us as gamers to now start learning a lot more of the intricacies that go into developing a video game. Lighting is a monster by itself. It is something that really can make a video game look good and presentable, and at the same time can break a video game because it can look bad, or if it's done well and it's not optimized, it can make your game run poorly. So these are a few things that you really have to kind of pick and choose. It's a cosmetic issue, but it is definitely a multi-million-dollar issue, because this is a multi-million-dollar franchise. The Cyberpunk 2077 franchise is a franchise that is deserving of all of the best and all of the best metrics from their development team to make the game exactly what it is. So looking at just a few, critics and criticisms, it's really interesting to see how all of these are being put together. And then you have to come from the side of animation and even the assets. So I read a comment from a very, very old school, long time Division 1 veteran, actually the first ETF, Sour Grumps a lot. He's also from the country where Cyberpunk 2077 is being cooked. And he mentioned something along the lines of some people seeing some bugs, or he was responding to a comment on some bugs and T-poses and some weird stuff that are pretty much in the game. And this is in the aspect of assets. Sometimes in video games, when they use assets, they most likely have to import those assets from other software like Maya or 3ds Max or Blender. These are 3D software, or in some cases Cinema 4D. These software are able to create assets independently of the game engine, and then they get imported into the game engine. Sometimes you can rig those assets by animating them, or by, in a sense, I would say manipulating them before bringing them into your engine. And many a time even after they've come into your engine and you've been able to work on them and animate them and use them in the scenario that you want to use them in, sometimes they may not respond with the overarching code in your base game. And so whenever you see a T-pose, just understand that yes, it was most likely not intentional. If you see some asset behaving somewhat weird, or if you see what in gaming they call a mesh, which is something that one of the IGN reviewers talked about. He said, whenever my character will look at himself in a mirror, sometimes I wouldn't see any hair on the character. And I know in my character customization, I did customize my character to have a specific look for their hair. But then on the gameplay, in some cutscenes, that hair was not, there when my character was being visualized from the 3D perspective. So these are some of the things that happen when these assets, being manipulated, having to be updated for each individual, having to work with your save file, having to work with all these different webs and intricacies, they start to glitch out. And so perhaps this bug is most likely, something that the developers have deployed this update for a lot of the cosmetic aspects. Now, there are other bugs regarding progression, regarding, player interaction, where some reviewers actually did say that interacting with some of the players did not allow for them to be able to get some, event triggers for them to progress. Event triggers are basically the easiest way I can explain what I know, my limited knowledge of event triggers is, when you reach a particular position or when you carry out a specific action, another event is basically unlocked or is triggered for you as a player to continue. In some cases, some examples, maybe you walk into a cave and a cutscene basically is triggered. From that cutscene, the next aspect of your game progression is that you continue maybe exploring that cave. In some cases, maybe a character has an indicator for you to go talk to. Once you speak to that character, it can trigger a cutscene or it can trigger a side mission. These things in some cases can be, I'm not saying they always are, can be event triggers. And these event trigger bugs have actually in some cases slowed down progression. And so perhaps this patch might be going to deal with some of these issues and helping to continue to smooth out the gameplay. But I expect that the work that's going to be done is going to take a while for this game to actually receive the full ironing that it needs to be. Another thing too is, at the moment they talked about delaying this game, and when they actually pushed the date from November to December 10th, I made a video and, I asked if they could pull this off. And, I'm glad that they're actually releasing the game, because I know that these intricacies and these different bugs will most likely not all be discovered in testing. I may have mentioned this in my last video that you can hire hundreds of, testers and QA testers who basically one game developer called the heroes of video games. But at the end of the day, they're still limited because the game is going to be going to hundreds of thousands, millions of users who actually have much more of a propensity to find different things in the game, because everyone is going to have a slightly different experience with the game. Some things may pop up that never did pop up in QA, and now the development team is able to address these things because bug reports are going to be all the way out there. And so I know and I'm confident, and the reason, even though I know that this game has bugs, even though I've highlighted it, I'm still going in is because I know that this development team knows and understands the commitment to fix their game. When we purchased this game on Good Old Games, the development team made a thank you video, a special thank you video, and they've always said thank you for believing in us. They don't have as much of the resources as many other big studios, but they do have the commitment. And I've been really following them. I've been following their GDC conferences, talking about The Witcher 3, talking about their optimization process. I think one of the really big challenging things too with a lot of the bugs we're seeing is just the time taking to optimize them. I watched a GDC conference when one of the developers talked about The Witcher 3's optimization and how many different bugs and junk they found all across the game. And it was really funny. In fact, one of the funny highlights of that was a bucket of chicken that was actually high resolution that had not been scaled down to fit a lower texture. And you said there was a very expensive bucket of chicken that was literally sitting in the middle of a village that was eating up so much resources and so much memory. So when your Witcher 3 got delivered, I can guarantee you that there were a lot more things like that basically during their testing and optimization, they did not find, or maybe didn't have enough time to address before the deadline of the game. And the game got shipped, but over time they cleaned it up, and they cleaned it up very well. The Witcher 3 runs very well. My hope for CD Projekt Red is in this cleanup phase, they're able to do it very, very fast and accurately and promptly, because this is a game that people want to spend multiple hours playing, and I do not blame them. People have waited for this game for years. So my own, comments to the development team is, thank you for putting in the work and being ambitious. Thank you for delivering the game even after all the challenges you've had to face with COVID, with multiple generations of, console iterations, new graphics cards, technological improvements, changes, and even with the challenges of dealing with, all the labor laws that you've had to basically stick to in your own country. And that you do have a dedicated fan base. Yes, I'm giving them a hard time because they also give other studios a hard time, and I'm just wanting to be consistent. But at the same time, I really do appreciate the fact that this team has gone the lengths to bring this game to the gaming community. See you guys in Night City. Peace out.